All right, good afternoon, all. My name is Joe Moran again. I'm the Director of Data and Research here at the South Dakota Department of Education. Today's presentation will be on the personnel record form, the K-12 staffing database collection and reporting tool developed by the South Dakota Department of Education and managed by the Division of Data and Research. On with me today, we have Jantina Nelson-Stasny, who will take over here in a bit and give you guys the walkthrough of the new system and answer any of your questions. Just a reminder, as you all came in, you were placed on mute to keep the volume down. So please, if you do have any questions as we go through the day today, either unmute yourself, ask to be unmuted, or add your questions into the chat and we will address them as appropriate. This meeting is being recorded, so we ask that any individual questions about your district or teachers or students or names or things like that are left out of the recording. So please hold them to the end and we can pause the recording at the end. Jantina and I will do our due diligence to turn this recording around as quick as possible and post to our webpage, which Jantina will show you here in a minute, so that you have a good access point for the training recording. As is normal with our in-house developed solutions, there have been some changes since last year, and there continues to be some changes based on the new state platform. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we work through them. We really do appreciate the feedback, the questions, the frustrations, the concerns. We have them as well, and we're doing our due diligence to try to help and support you guys through the collection and reporting period. So that being said, I am going to man the chat box here and give you guys any answers or to your questions in there or in letting people in. And I will at this point turn it over to Jantina.
Okay, hello, welcome to the PRF training. My name is Jantina. I am your main contact for the personal record form. It's also known as the PRF system. The purpose of the PRF database is to provide a data collection tool for South Dakota school districts to enter their required staffing information. The data contained in the PRF is used for federal and state reporting, research by state and national organizations, and requests from the public. To access the personal record form website for submitting your data and printing off the manuals, you should log in through the following internet address. Joe, do you want to put it in the comments? The DOE.SD?
Gotcha.
Yep, got it. Okay. Once there, you'll notice there are step-by-step instructions that have been developed to assist districts. The first breakout is for logging in and contact information. If you click on the login directions, it'll walk you through step-by-step. The PRF contacts will give you a spreadsheet of everyone in the department that works on this system and what their phone number is and their email address. So you can contact others if you can't get an answer immediately from me. Next is the important information. We posted some updates for the 24-25 school year, and you can click through and read those. And then under the collection forms, there are step-by-step instructions for each of these. You have to click, this is the educators. And then the desk guide will give you step-by-step instructions to assist you in completing each data collection. Also, as soon as we have the recording, we will break it out again by intro, how to access the system. And that way, if you just want to listen to the portion on plans of intent, you can listen to that portion or whatever you need help with. The state PRF platform is managed by BIT and it has been switched to the single sign-on. They refer to it as SSO, and it's for business to business, which they refer to as B2B modernization. This means that you will no longer be able to use that fake email address that we gave you. It included the @PRF as your username. Instead, you will now be able to use your school email address to log in. There will be an automatic redirect from the current login screen to the new B2B login screen. And Joe, could you please put that B2B link in the comments? You need to be sure to resave your bookmark for this login screen. Additionally, the primary contact will now be able to manage your users that can access the system. Most of these were set up ahead of time based on the information you gave us on the educational directory collection. If the PRF contact didn't have an account already set up in the single sign-on system, we weren't able to assign a primary contact. So Chris Booth tried contacting you with a registration code to create a business account. There are 7 accounts, Crow Creek, Freeman Academy, Northeast Ed Co-op, Porcupine, St. Thomas School, Takini, and Wounded Knee that still need to follow those steps that Chris gave you. Once you have those set up, we will need to add you as the primary contact. If you need help, please reply to the message Chris sent you, and we will give you assistance with logging in. Let's get started. Let's click on the login and contact information and click to log into the PRF system. Once there, you're going to click on the login in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You will need to put your school email address in there. Mine is a test email address that we created. Once you click next, it's going to prompt you for your email address again. And then you're going to have to put in your password. And you have to type it in correctly. Okay, and we want to stay signed in. The B2B portal does use the multi-factor authentication. It's referred to as MFA. If users need additional help setting this up, there is a knowledge article on the multi-factor authentication for the B2B portal. Joe, would you copy that link and put it in the comments?
Sure thing.
I had to do it the first time too. It'll ask you to download an app, or you can skip that step and you can, have it sent to your cell phone or your landline. Now, I've already done that step. I was trying to get ready this weekend, and you'll have to do that step. Now we will show you how you can give one of your coworkers access to your district's portal to enter information. Or if you have someone that left employment and you need to disable someone's account, we will show you how to do that as well. Note, you will only be able to do this if you are the primary contact. So if you're following along and we set you up as a primary contact on the business account, you'll be able to follow these steps. We use the PRF contact from the ed structure to assign the primary contact this year. If that person leaves, you'll need to contact us so we can assign a new primary contact. Now, to give someone permissions, you have to click on the services in the menu bar. Under the category menu, you have to select the business account administration. Then you will select the create a business account and click on the submit request to enter the information. I'm just gonna pretend like I am adding Joe to this test district that we set up. Your business dropdown will include your district portal. We created this fictitious one to do the training. You have to put in the email address, and then you can click on submit. I already did this this weekend. Joe received an email message. He clicked on the link in that email message, and then he was given access to this system. Now, if we want to take away someone's permissions, you have to click on your information and then go to the contacts. And I'm going to take away Joe Cron's permissions. So you click on the name of the contact you'd like to update. Then you click on the update button on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll be taken to this screen where you can disable the login, and that will prevent them from being able to sign into their account. And save. Now to get to the district portal where you put in this school year's information. After you log into this B2B portal, I am logged in as the test district. You'll click on your services in the menu bar. Then under the category menu, you'll select DOE. This is your retirement, but this is the DOE that you need to go into. If you do not see DOE in your categories, you need to contact us at doeprf@state.sd.us. Joe, can you put that in the comments?
Yep, and at this point, actually, I'm going to drop all of the contact emails in a list here. So the first one that Jantina just mentioned is a common one for all of us, but I'm also adding myself, Christina Booth, and Jantina's email address, so you have them all in one location.
Okay, great. So to launch into the district portal, you have to click on the personal data collection. This will launch you into the screen that you saw last year. So your district portal will default to your district. I had to set up this fictitious K-12 test district, and it has fictitious schools called Apple Blossom. Something I've noticed is some people's doesn't default to the school year 2025, and you'll have to switch it to 2025 if it still defaults to 2024.
And Jantina, I believe the default is your last selection. So if the last time you entered the PRF, it was 2024 school year and you were in school year 2024, you will have to select the 2025 school year. And then in your following access points to it, it should say 2025. But as a database now that has multiple years in it, always a good reference point to check what school year you're currently looking at.
It won't let you modify the previous years, so you need to be in 2025. As far as the migration of historical PRF data from the previous system to this new system, it's still partially complete. Here's how we approached the process. We migrated and validated the previous 6 years. So school year 17-18 through 2022 to 2023 into the new system. And as indicated in the home screen, you will now have access to this longitudinal data that reflects the accurate snapshot within the exception of 2023. The new software company accidentally didn't have the data locked down for 2023. So after July 1st, when those people certificate expired, some of their cert statuses got switched. And we will go back at some point and get this corrected.
Jantina, is it safe to say that the vast majority of the data for all years is accurate with the exception of some of those time-based ones that switch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are still, working on some snapshot data to prepare it for school years 2000, 2001 to 16, 17. And we did not get time this summer to migrate and validate it into the new system. As we get this information validated, you'll be able to access that historical data sets, and they'll be made available to your district. So as you get familiar with the layout of the PRF landing page, we hope that the terminology and components start to look familiar to your previous work in the PRF. If you click on the view requirements, this screen provides a visual representation of data requirements that otherwise will become apparent as it determines which menus your district has access to. So take a minute to find out exactly what you'll need in order to complete this data submission. The K-12 test district that I have is set up like a public. When I click on staff management, you'll see, I see the educators, that is for all different districts. As far as the bus drivers, you can see that everybody but the virtual schools have to submit that data. Classified, you'll see that the non-pub, tribal BIA, alternative, and virtual schools don't submit, and so on and so forth for each collection. When I click on district information, you'll see all districts have to submit the attendance centers, the plans of intent, everybody but the state special schools and alternative. And the vacancy report, we do not have available at this time, but we're going to try and load it into production mid-submission. The assurance statement, all districts have to submit the top section for the October submission. And then some of the districts don't have to submit the bottom section. As far as the June submission, the publics just have to submit that. The rest of the districts do not have to submit that information. So step one, we want to go over the qualified staff. This is just a tool you can use to determine what endorsements are needed to teach a class. And then you can also, if you have turnover, you can use it to see which of your staff are qualified to teach the class. So for example, if I were to type in fourth grade here and click view, it's going to tell me that the endorsement needed to teach this is that self-contained K through 4. And of my teachers that I have listed in the educator menu, Mickey is the only one that holds that endorsement. Again, this is just a tool. If you have questions, you can put them in the comments so we can address them at the end of the training if they're specific to someone. Are there any questions yet, Joe, that need to be addressed?
No questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. Step 2 is the attendance centers for public schools and co-ops. You will need to double check the teacher compensation base salary. This salary is the beginning teacher salary offered by districts to a teacher with 0 years of experience. And base pay depends on the school district, whereas the actual salary you put on the PRF records will depend on the teacher's qualifications and experience. Do not include the increases in base salary for the units beyond the bachelor's degree or any years of service increments. If you renegotiate mid-year due to your teacher compensation accountability, you will need to remember to update this figure. As you know, Dr. Graves is encouraging school districts to increase their base salary now because the base salary will need to be increased by the funding formula percentage that the legislatures set each year. By 2027 fiscal year, one of the accountabilities will be based on the base salary to make sure it has been increased to 45,000. Last year in FY 2024, the look back accountability was still based on the look back to fiscal year 2017. Now we're in fiscal year 2025, and the accountability will be switched to a 1-year look back to see if the district is at least 97% compliant with the 4% increase of salary and benefits that our legislators set. The educational directory information down below, you provided to Angie Bren, and it's loaded into the PRF. If and only if the academic term switches, you can switch it, but I would not suggest, playing around here and switching it from quarterly to trimesterly. As it switches all the educators assigned to that school, and you'll have to manually correct them. It does tell you which of your staff are assigned to that school, and which ones you would have to go in and switch from quarterly to trimesterly.
Relative to the data that Jay and Tina just shared, the teacher-based salary data there, I know at some points during the course of your year, it seems tedious and it seems like, why am I entering all this data? What's happening with it? Just a note of appreciation to all of you who spend the time to diligently make sure that your data is accurate. That teacher-based salary figure there was what the legislatures discussed and spoke about last year during the debates and negotiations on that legislation. And despite where we all where our opinions lie in terms of the outcomes of that, it's important to know that the work that you do is really valuable to those discussions and debates. Making sure that the data you enter here, not only here, but also in teacher compensation, is an important measurement to your staff and all your teachers, and therefore your students who are being taught by your teachers, because this data is actively being pulled and used in those large scale legislative discussions. So just a point of gratitude to all of you who take the time and make sure that this is accurate. Just a note here to help you, to help make sure we all realize the importance of the data that we enter into our state systems.
The system-wide attendance center is a fictitious attendance center that we create. That way you can, list your administrators or your ed specialists as employed there instead of breaking out their time as 33% elementary, 33% middle school, 34% high school. You can just code them as a 1 FTE to that system-wide attendance center. You cannot put your instructional staff assigned to that school though. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comment box. Is there anything that needs to be addressed before I move to the next step?
Still clear on the questions for right now, Jantina.
Okay. Step 3 is the educators. And this is, where you enter your teachers, administrators, such as your principals, superintendents, CEOs, and your education specialists, such as your counselors, business managers, psychologists, SPED director, curriculum specialist, tech coordinator, and instructional coaches. We continue to have development issues with the new platform. We still cannot provide reports that can be printed out. Therefore, I have a suggestion on how to give your principals a spreadsheet so they can make their red proofreading marks to your report by staff person. Now you can export that report by staff person by copying and pasting the data. You have to make sure you copy it all. And then you can paste it into a spreadsheet. And you need to be sure that before you share this with others, that you delete the social security number. It is a mass social, but I would still delete it before sending it through email. To capture any edits that your principal may make, you can suggest that they, do like a track changes, or you can ask that they turn the font red if they were to like make a correction. Say like they switched this from Apple Blossom Middle School to Apple Blossom Elementary. They could turn that font red, and that would tell you that you need to make a correction to this record. So that is a suggestion since you can't print out your nice reports anymore.
And Tina, while you're navigating here, I'll also add, because I know I managed several of these requests last year. If you have a very specialized request and you can't figure out how to pull the data from the new system, we know there are various ways, and it's not the easiest, and it's not the old one-page printout that you're familiar with or used to. Don't hesitate to send those to us. I know we were able to accommodate the vast majority of the one-off requests that we received last year. We can't promise to be able to accommodate every single question and ask that we get, but we will do what we can to make sure that we're providing you with the information that you need to make sure that your collection is a successful one this year.
And once you are in your educator screen, there are some nice tools. You can filter your lists. If you click on the filter and add an because you want the school year to be 2025. and say you want to find the person with the last name that contains duck and click on run, it'll narrow down to that record. You can clear that filter by removing the condition. You can sort by last name and then by first name if you add a sort. And that will sort your list. So that's just some nice functionality that this screen does have. There are 3 things you need to do with the October submission. You need to add your new employees, you need to update your existing staff, and you need to mark those that are no longer employed. Those that are no longer employed, they do stay with this screen for this school year. And then we drop them off during the roll forward. So for any new staff that you have, you need to click to add a new employee. And once you do that, you need to enter their social security number. Again, these are fictitious numbers. It's going to hit the certification system and it's going to pull in the information from their initial application, gender, date of birth, race. It's going to pull in right away if they are certified. This one has an alt preliminary certificate, which is a red flag. And you need to let your principals know right away because this certificate will not allow him to teach in South Dakota. This is for him to apply for teaching positions. And it, is for a public or department accredited school to offer him a teaching contract. Once he's accepted that teaching contract, he must complete the specific alternative certification application to be certified to teach. So once you have him entered, you can say that this is a new employee, first year hired as staff in any school district in any state. You can enter what his salary is. For first year, I think I put 45,500. And if this is the first year, you would enter 0 for the years of experience. There is a record validated here, and this field can be set at any time. This indicator field is the mechanism used to confirm with the system that the record was reviewed, modified appropriately, and then prepared for submission. So switching it from yes to no triggers the final update to calculations and status changes. We added these calculations to the screen this year. And I'm just gonna trigger that calculation by clicking on yes. I also need to add the instructional FTE to add that calculation. So I'm going to add the assignment records. If this were a high school teacher and there's a 7-period day, you would enter each class assignment as say 1 out of 7 would be a 0.14. I'm going to make this easy. I'm just going to enter it as an elementary school teacher. full-time is a 1 FTE. If they are teaching digital curriculum, you can place a check mark. If this is electronic distance instruction, you can place a check mark. If they're doing dual licensure, where they're pulling students out for second grade and providing the special ed information, you can create a dual licensure. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to enter the quarters and save. Once that recalculates, we can go back to Donald's record. And you can see that the adjusted instructional salary for the full-time stayed the same. But if this were a part-time position, this would calculate, it would convert the figure to what a full-time person would be making. And we think that visually that will help, for reasonableness when you double check these records. So these are calculated fields based on what you list for salary and for FTE down here.
Jantina, could you slide up to the demographic piece here before you move on?
Yeah.
Real quickly, a note, because I know this was a piece that kind of caught a couple of us last year. Jantina indicated when you enter the SSN information, what that's doing is it's technically pulling the information from the educator certification profile onto this part of the system. So on occasion, what you'll find is that, say there was no race identified on the educator profile when they originally set that profile up. You're going to find this more and more often as we get out past the 5-year window of certification. So teachers who have been in the field longer are more likely to not have one of these fields indicated. There are 2 ways to resolve these issues because it will not allow you to save the record without a race identified. One way is to have your educator log on to their educator portal, update that information, and then it will pull through. As you're all aware, that timing does not always allow us to get that all done in time. So if you're running short on time, you can also provide us an observed race or ethnicity, and we can add that information temporarily so that you can submit. And then the educator, the next time they come on, will have the ability to update the race ethnicity data as they see fit. Just wanted to point that out because I know it was a point of panic last year, and don't let that get you too panicked. We can resolve those issues. Just know to reach out to us or your educator and have them update that information. Same thing with their gender or date of birth. Those are pieces that you cannot save the record without. Thanks, Jantine.
Okay, so that was, how to add a new employee. Now, the existing staff that sign a contract for 24-25, all of that information is rolled forward for you. So if we look at Minnie Mouse, this information stays the same. Employment in the school system has been continued. As far as the salary, you would have to put in this year's negotiated agreement. It looks like this person was a principal last year. You would need to update the years of experience. If they were a principal and teaching a class, you would update both the teaching and the admin, but that's not the case. She was a principal last year. So, if her assignments, stay the same and, the FTE is the same full-time, all you do is, switch it to record validated, and save that record for those existing staff. Now, if you have an employee who are no longer a staff person after working the first part of the school year, I'm just gonna bring up Mickey. If Mickey Mouse was employed during the first part of the school year and then left employment, you will need to update his information. You do not change his record to reflect no longer employed. This will be done next year in the 2025-2026 collection. That's a common mistake. You have to account for the portion of the year that he was employed. So, to do that, you have to open each of the assignment records and update the quarters or trimesters he actually worked at the school and adjust the full-time equivalency to reflect that he's no longer a full-time employee. Also, you have to update the salary if you're a public or a co-op to reflect what he was paid on the time worked. So if we look here, we're not going to switch this to no longer employed because he was employed for a portion of this school year. This is last year's negotiated agreement. This year, I'm just going to pretend like he got bumped on his negotiated agreement to 60,000. But because he left employment after working the first part of the school year, he was only paid 15,000 of that. You're gonna update the years of experience. He was a teacher. And as far as the assignment record, if the amount paid was 15,000, of 60,000, you take that 15,000 divided by that 60,000, that's approximately a 0.25 FTE, which means that, he probably just worked trimester 1, and you're going to remove trimester 2 and 3 and save. Now, if we look at that adjusted instructional salary, the amount paid out to him was 15,000. His negotiated agreement was 60,000. So when we convert that 0.25 to what a full-time person would make, that is the equivalent. And we'll use that for reasonableness when we do our edit checks on the assurance statement. That is not what you paid out. That is just a calculated field. So you'll mark the record as validated and save.
Jantina, before moving past this, we do have a question that might be beneficial. Pause here. So could you scroll down to the educator certification fields? So the question in the chat came through to say, what does the meaning of certification status none mean? Do you have a section, Jantina, that specifically calls these two fields out, or?
So the cert status when we rolled this data forward, we noticed that some of our fields did not calculate. And we've got a ticket in to recalculate them. It just hasn't run the fixed script yet, but you can force the record to run that fixed script by toggling the yes, no. And that's what I did. It switched that from, none to certified.
Yeah, and as a overall general output here, the top bar there that says educator profile certification status. That is the actual status of the individual educator certification on the certification side. The certification status is the indicator on the PRF side of that status. So there are numerous statuses on the certification side of where that person is in the certification process. On the PRF side, we only report three statuses. You're either certified, meaning you're certified, you have a certificate, and you are properly endorsed for the assignments that you were provisioned. You're non-authorized, meaning you have a certificate, but you are not properly endorsed for the assignments you have been assigned. Or you're not certified, meaning you have no certification. So you'll see there are some differences there. We provide you with both field indicators so that you know not only where the PRF status is of their certification, but also where their certification is on the certification side of the system. This can be a little confusing, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. And as Jantina indicated, it should not say none. And that just means simply it hasn't run through the process of checking on the certification side. So as you work through and save and validate this year's data, you should see those fields update and indicate to what you would anticipate.
Okay, one more example. Um, let's take Mr. Potato Head. He is acting as a long-term substitute to fill a position, so he will need to be added to a PRF record. A long-term substitute teacher is defined as an individual acting as a teacher of record for more than 45 cumulative school days. So Mr. Potato Head got hired for, we're going to pretend like 46 days at $175 per day as an individual without a valid or inactive certificate, acting as a special education teacher of record for more than 45 cumulative school days in a vacant teaching position while the school district pursues a contract for a teacher. So in this case, you'll notice that the cert status is not certified. It's not going to find anything on the cert side of the system because this person doesn't hold any type of certification. You are going to mark this person as a long-term substitute. As far as the instructional salary, you're going to take those 46 days, multiply it by $175, and that's approximately $8,050. Total teaching experience, you're going to leave that as zeros. And then as far as the assignment record, if you take that 46 days of teaching, typically a school district has 175 or 178 school days. I took it divided by 175, which is about a 0.26 FTE. And you'll notice that this salary is quite a bit lower than your base salary for your teachers. But we need these individuals identified as long-term substitutes so that we can keep them out of our salary calculations. So again, you have to report what they're teaching and mark their records as validated. Are there any comments?
There are, Jantina, and I'm frantically looking through the desk guide for the exact page to reference here, but I'll read the question out and you could give a verbal answer and then I'll provide the document piece here later. The question is, do you put an individual who are long-term subs for folks who are out on FMLA or maternity leave? And I know we have a detailed section of the days and counts and when. Do you have a specific answer?
I believe those, let me go to the desk guide.
As typical government employees, the answer would be that depends. And we will tell you what that depends on.
Okay, so this desk guide has quite a few pages in it, but if you do a control F, you can do a find and you can put in FMLA. So if you have a substitute hired to replace a teacher on maternity leave FMLA for less than, for more than 45 school days, it says submit a long-term substitute waiver. No. Submit PRF for this individual. Yes. The teacher for whom the substitute was hired was reported on PRF, and the substitute will be temporary and hired for more than 45 cumulative school days. The plan of intent will say temporary, and the reason hired would be long-term sub without waiver.
Jantina, what page are you on there?
I am on page 20.
And I am currently dropping a link and a page reference to what Jantina is looking at if it's helpful.
Okay, moving on to step 4. Once you have all of your records validated in the educator section, you can put in your plans of intent. There are 2 types of plans of intent. Non-authorized plans of intent are any employees serving outside their current certification. Will be on a plan of intent stating how the district intends to ensure they gain licensure. The qualification portion of the plan of intent gives districts and the educator, as soon as you put that in, the various options to gain licensure, along with what each of the requirements are. So if we look at Mickey Mouse, I just want to use his record. You're going to notice that there are 2 out there, and I intentionally put him in with that dual licensure, and it will prompt that he gets the special ed licensure, and it's also going to prompt for a content um, uh, plan of intent to get algebra. So he has to be dually licensed to be pulling those kids out and providing special ed and algebra. So let's go through and look at how you would put in his plan of intent. Again, he's, listed as non-authorized. As far as the checkboxes for temporary or retirement, if you put that in, that flags accreditation to review this plan of intent and why you don't have them set up to gain that licensure. So most of the time you're going to skip these with the exception of those long-term substitutes. Reason individual was hired. I'm going to just say that no qualified applicants applied. As far as the duties for this bed, I'm just going to say that, awarding grades to the student on an IEP. If you want to track what that person told you, you could put comments in there. As far as the endorsement, based on the assignment, it's going to pull which endorsements this individual could work towards. And it's only special ed in this case. It's going to pull in the preparation that person holds. And you need to remember to click on that save button. Once you click on that save button, it generates the qualifications. And then you have to come in and you say which of the qualifications this person is going to do to get that endorsement. Now, you have to take a praxis and you have to do some coursework. And this one would have to take a PLT test as well. Once you click on save down here, it's a little goofy, but you have to remember to come up and click on the submit button. Once you click that submit button, this plan is locked down. If you talk to that individual and they tell you, oops, I don't want to do X, Y, or Z, you can revoke that plan of intent if it's before October 15th. And then you can revise it, but then you have to resubmit it again. So we got the one plan of intent in for the SPED. I also want to do whoops, you have to wait till those little 3 dots are done. I also want to do the content one that makes sure that, you know, not only is he working towards special ed licensure, but also towards math licensure. You'll notice once those are submitted, they turn into read-only records. As far as the algebra, again, most of the time you're going to skip these check marks. You're going to say the reason that you hired them. You're going to pick the endorsement. I'm just going to pick the intermediate one. You're going to save. You're going to say how this person intends to add this, if they intend to take this test or this test. And in this case, there are options. This person could either take one of these praxis tests, or this person could do a major in content area. Most people aren't going to go back and pay for a content major. They're going to take one of these praxis tests. So again, you have to save your qualifications, and then you have to remember to come up and submit. Once you have these plans of intent entered, I'm going to show you how Mickey can now see this. If Mickey were to log into their educator profile. I'm going to impersonate this person's profile, so I can show you what your teachers see when they log into their side of the system. Okay, if you go to their profile here, I'm going to minimize this caret, but now if we look at the plans of intent, the educator can now see what you said they were going to do to gain this endorsement. This is for the special ed. And the other one was for the algebra. So that's a new feature with this system. And it automatically updates, you know, the profile for them. If they are done taking that praxis test to add, you know, say the algebra, they can then, from their profile, they can click apply, and they can click to add an endorsement or update their existing certificate. And you need to remember that, it does take time for these applications to get processed. But as soon as this certification officer updates that certificate, the plan of intent is going to switch from submitted over to completed. So if we were to go back to your district portal and if Mickey had submitted an application and one of the certification officers processed that, you would see this plan status go from submitted to completed.
Jantina, there is a question in the chat about plans of intent, and it says, are the staff plans of intent already entered in the system through certification? And I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but the plans of intent are generated as you update this year's PRF and assignments. So as you update the assignments on the educator, it will calculate based on their certifications, whether they need another plan of intent or not. And as you can see there, Mickey had one last year. So the numbers of that plan of intent added up to 2. So that's a case where he had one last year and again has another plan of intent because he's on year 2 to complete that. So it's not as if the plan of intent is added through the certification system, but when you add the assignments, that person will have a plan of intent generated based on that assignment. Because if Mickey were to be reassigned this year to a different course that he has the certifications for, there would be no need for that plan of intent this year. Let me know in the chat or unmute yourself here now, but let me know if I did not directly answer the question or if you have a further follow-up on that. Or Jantina, did I get anything wrong there?
No, it's correct. The applicant can see, the 2024 plan of intent and the 2025 plans of intent. They can see all the ones that you've put out there. And, they then have to apply to get that endorsement added in order for that to be marked as complete. And then in that educator record, that non-authorized status will go to certified. Also, if you have those staff that have a temporary social security number and they're waiting on their social security number, they're able to come into this profile as soon as they have their actual social. They'll see like where they can change that temporary one. This one didn't have a temporary, so I can't show you that. But if the teacher logs into their profile and switches it to the actual social security number, it will merge the PRF record with that CERT record so that it's reflecting the correct social security number.
So I was just asking because we have a couple teachers on alt certification where they had their preliminary alt certification was accepted. And hopefully they're, will be getting their alternative certification, but we still would have to enter all of their data into the system and then place them on the plan of intent.
So Deb, if you have some of those that have those alt preliminary certificates and they applied for alt cert, you can hold off until that October 15th to submit their plan of intent in hopes that that alt cert will get processed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. All right, so on the plans of intent, there is also a type of plan of intent. And you'll notice that there's the corrective action plans. These are different than the plans of intent. So for those corrective action plans where the person is pursuing certification, the status column will reflect that it has been completed once that person obtains their license. So those alt preliminaries are going to be on a corrective action plan. Once this type of plan gets marked as completed, they will have received their alt cert. And now is the time to review your corrective action plans and alert that principal that they need to sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation with these educators, as they will not count towards teacher compensation without a valid license. These educators need to hold a valid license by the second Friday in June in order to count towards teacher compensation. If that certification isn't necessarily sufficient for them to be deemed state certified to teach, then it'll generate a plan of intent, but they'll still count towards the half-cent, tax increase. So let's look at Mr. Potato Head. As he is on a corrective action plan. If
Jantina,
you recall, yep.
as you're going on, there are people who have to jump to other meetings and have things and timeframes they have to go to today. Just a reminder, this meeting will be uploaded to the webpage and we will send out a communication to all of you once that is done to indicate that it is there. I will say it might take a little bit, and you are also currently still able to use the last year's recordings, which have not shifted vastly from this year's recordings. The sign-on will be different, but everything else is pretty close. So there are currently recordings posted on the PRF webpage, and the new ones will be updated shortly. And we appreciate everyone's attendance today. So Santina, you can jump back in there.
Yeah. If you recall, Mr. Potato Head was the long-term sub that, in this case, you can use the temporary assignment. Once you pick that temporary assignment, there will be a reason for long-term sub with waiver. And then it just asks you for the plan of action that you are putting in place for that person to gain a certificate. In this case, you'll have to complete that administrative rule waiver application for long-term substitutes. Joe, if you want to add that link to the comments. And you're gonna have to request a waiver of that rule. You have to gain your school board approval, and then you have to submit that to DOE accreditation at state.sd.us along with the school board meeting minutes. So, that is the plan of intent for this case. Typically, the board meetings are like the second, I think I picked the second Tuesday in, that's when I'm saying this will be completed and save, and you need to remember to submit that plan of intent. Again, just so you know, if you submit and it's before October 15th, you could revoke that, make a correction, and you just have to remember to resubmit. Any questions?
No additional questions at this time, Jantina.
Okay. So let's go to the classified staffing. The personnel included in classified staff are staff not required to be certified through the Department of Education, but may obtain licensure through another entity. This, menu will be available to the publics, co-ops, in the state special schools. If the others need to take a quick break, you could, but I'm not going to spend much time on this because it's pretty quick and dry. So basically you're reporting the FTE by code. This information gets rolled forward, and it's pretty seamless for most districts. You need to, double check your entries, and make sure you have the correct FTEs entered here. Something districts requested, is to be able to tie a name to each code so that they know who their predecessor was, counting previously if there was turnover. It's not required, but you can now add the demographic information. If we look at the athletic director here, last year it was reported that this district had a 0.75 FTE. If that position went to full time, I can switch that to 1. And then as far as the individual that holds this, it's Winnie the Pooh, is who is listed as holding that position. So as there are changes in the hours for, the classified, you just need to increase the FTE and report that information under classified. You do need to say, yes, you have classified staff. If you say no, you will get a warning message that all your records are going to be deleted. So don't select it, or unless you want to re-enter them.
I will say at this point, if you do accidentally delete a lot of records, reach out. There are ways we can back end into that data, or you can always use the uploads records to export your prior year data and import it as current year data. And that's something we can help walk you through as well.
Yeah.
So we try to scare you, but not the end of the world.
Yeah. And the uploads, typically, the bigger districts use, Sioux Falls and Rapid City, typically use it instead of manually entering information. I'm not really going to cover it much in this, presentation, but, there are options to upload as well. Paraprofessionals is your 6th step, to enter that data. Again, you're going to say, yes, you have paraprofessionals. And this, we had some troubles with the rollover, and we are still working on a solution. And we will send out an update as soon as we have the attendance center records rolled forward. For this training, I just kind of created a record. And most of you are going to see all of your staff listed here. But if you look in the total qualified columns in the district level FTE, you're going to see zeros. And the attendance center detail, you'll see that there's not that information. They are working on it. We will send an email out as soon as we get that resolved. So if we edit this record, it rolled forward the date hired on the individual, whether they're qualified or not. They're qualified based on this high school diploma and passing that parapro test. This is the part that on some of your records you may not see, and they're still working to get these rolled forward. If we edit this record, you can see how this Sleeping Beauty is employed at Apple Blossom Elementary. You can see the supervisor is Buzz Lightyear. And then based on the funding source, if you pick the other funding source, you're going to see that that person potentially could serve all various students. Now, if you pick a different funding source, it may not list. Oh, I had other. it may only, like REAP, you can only serve the regular education. But the other funding source, the students served, you have to break it out by the 3 to 5 special ed and the 5 to 21 or regular ed. Then you have to add their responsibilities and save. And go back to Sleeping Beauty's record. And then back to paraprofessional. And you can see these recalculated. Don Smith is the contact from the special ed for special ed paras. Her phone number is 605-773-2535. Jordan Verlick is the contact for the title paras. Her phone number is 605-773-6509. Any questions?
None right now, Jantina, but I would like to just reiterate the points you made about the rollover this year. We did have, again, the same issues as we did last year. Paraprofessional data did not roll over initially. Late last week, we were able to roll over all paraprofessional records, meaning the first part of that record that Jantina walked you through, the second part, the attendance center detail records. We were able to get about half to roll over and have found the other half that did not roll over, and we are still working on that. So give us a little bit of time. We will update you in the near future about how we're going about that. I would also add, if you want to just, if you're a district and you have 2 paraprofessionals and you can just add the information back in, that will not harm anything in our way. So please proceed and add that. But if you'd rather wait and see what we were able to fix, you can wait us out and we will get that data updated as soon as possible.
Okay, we're going to move on to step 7 for the bus driver collection. The purpose of the bus driver collection is to gather required information regarding the school bus driver licensure and training. Each school bus driver must maintain proper active licensure and complete the appropriate training at least once every 5 years. This collection allows districts to monitor the required training for their bus drivers. So let's take, for example, Daffy Duck here. And you'll notice that you have to have the correct social security number, enter the name. There is a new field that we added this year. And the new field is for those that know South Dakota CDL is required. So this is an optional field. If one of these are selected, then the record doesn't have to check for an active South Dakota driver's license through the DPS system. This dropdown should say drives 15 or less passenger vehicle. We have put a ticket in to get that corrected. And this is for those drivers driving 15 or less passenger vehicles. And for personnel who provide specialized pupil transportation, as per the student's individual education plan, their IEP. If transportation is indicated as a related service, but they're driving this 15 or less passenger vehicle, that person is not required to have a CDL due to the vehicle used for the transportation purposes, such as a small passenger van or a car. But they do have to have a valid driver's license. The other way to skip the calculation of the driver's license status through DPS is if you mark them as an out-of-state CDL, then we can't check that for you to tell you that they have a valid license. as far as employment type, you can list them as contracted, employed, or a substitute. Again, you know, if there's kids on there that have transportation on their IEP, you do need to break out that FTE between special ed and regular ed based on the hours for transportation on that IEP. And then you have to answer, has this person received training for bus drivers in the past 5 years? This person received training on 10/9 of 24, so yes. And you need to mark the record as validated and save. Once you do that, it's going to hit the public safety's API, and it's going to bring back a driver's license status. In this case, I have a fictitious social security number, so of course it's not going to find a driver's license status for this individual.
Jantina. We did have a question pop up. Are schools that are contracting busing through a private company required to complete this section?
Yes.
Yes, and I believe we do have some cases where that is true, and the districts are working with those bus driving companies to get the SSNs and make sure that's all valid. This goes without saying, but I will put it on record. The no South Dakota CDL requirement option does allow you to skip the check. Know that that does put you in a position of liability in the case that that information is not accurate. So please do keep that in mind as you're entering this information, and make sure the information is accurate as possible. For the off chance that something were to come back on this data, you want to make sure that you were being truthful from what the district's hiring intent was for that individual.
And you have, if it's an out-of-state person, you have to track that driver's license status. You have to keep track of that. We will not track that for you. This is just for, you know, those that have their South Dakota CDL, where you can tell what their status is. So
One more question, Jantina. Do we need to add sped staff, teachers, paraprofessionals that transport students, usually no more than 4 students at a time? So I'm assuming this is an individual vehicle or a van of sorts.
yes, if there is transportation on that IEP, we use this for the Part B federal report to report that FTE. So that driver's license status, you know, that is our connection to Department of Public Safety. And it tells you if they have an active eligible CDL, if something has been suspended. There are 6 potential bus driver license check status indicators. And right now, Megan Tatum has replaced Carol Euchre, and she's been notifying districts, but we're anticipating an automated communication. So you want to make sure that you do not unsubscribe, or you would not receive this notice. This status is calculated based on a weekly process that gets implemented on Sunday evenings. Some of the possible bus driver license check statuses are active or inactive. If you see undefined, that is going to be the value for school year collection 2002 to 2023. We set them to undefined because the system wasn't connected to the South Dakota public safety system and had no way to determine the driver's license status. If you see not found, it means the social security number doesn't match what DPS has, or the name on the PRF doesn't match the legal name on the DPS. That was supposed to be changed, so I don't think the legal name will make a difference. If they hold a Class B CDL with the passenger and school bus endorsements as well as a valid medical card, we have a few issues with those that will reflect not found. Or if they hold a CDL in another state, it will say not found. If you see the value of system unavailable, it means the API hit a maximum load and the API connection needs to be reset. So it's a problem on our end, basically. No CDL found are for those driving the 15 or less passenger vehicles, or there is no match in the South Dakota DPS system, but there is a match in the South Dakota DPS system, but they don't have a valid CDL. So Megan Tatum is the contact and her phone number is 773-4771. Questions?
There is one more, Jay and Tina. It is, how about for sports? Are coaches and teachers required to be added to PRF? And as a former athletic director, coach, and teacher myself, I can say that is accurate. You do need to be added to the PRF to make sure that you have a valid driver's license via the state statute that we're working to validate here.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Step 8, contracted services. The purpose of the contracted services reporting is to provide a collection tool for school districts and service providers to report personnel that are third-party contractors and providing special education or related services that are considered part of the standard district operations. Contracted staff reporting is required. And with that, we collect the data from the co-ops. So, if there's an entry where you list the provider as a co-op, you need to go in and you need to delete that entry. That would be considered a double reporting because it's being reported by your district. You can see the allocated services from the co-op and the virtual districts if you click on this link. Now, in this case, I didn't have a fake co-op or a fake virtual district that I could, allocate services to. But as they, validate their records, you're going to see their services show up here. That they're using, that they're allocating those services to your district. So in this case, if you reported a duplicate entry, you need to remember to remove that entry. If you have a third party, contracted service, like through a private provider or through like a hospital, you need to come in and tell us, if it's a hospital or a private provider, what attendance center that is being offered. Now, this is broken out by special ed assignment codes or classified codes. So depending on what you select, the other one goes away. See how the assignment codes went away when I did this service? 3 to 5.1 and 0. Questions on contracted services? I'm going to
No.
leave this no, just because I'm going to generate an error on the assurance statement.
No additional questions at this time, Jantina. I will note for the crowd, though, I did add Megan Tatum's information into the chat if you have questions further about bus drivers.
Okay. As far as the vacancies, this is another one that, we don't have functioning properly. You'll just have to ignore this at this time. We will send an update as soon as we have this available. But I'm going to show you how this works to generate a vacancy. So under your educators, we track the turnover and which positions were left vacant. So if we go to Snow White's record and we edit that record, she was employed last year and her record rolled forward into this school year. She was the first grade teacher, but we're going to pretend like she left employment. So you're going to switch the status, and she was not employed for any portion of this school year. So you're going to list her as no longer employed. It's going to give you a message saying that it's going to delete out the years of experience and it's going to delete out the assignment records, and that's okay. Then you're going to have to give her a reason that she left your district. I'm just going to say employed in another South Dakota school district. Now, was this position filled the first day of school? We're going to pretend like this was no, it was left vacant. If we were to say yes, it was filled, it would create a turnover record, but it wouldn't create a vacancy record. So to create a vacancy record, you have to say no, it was left vacant. Then you have to select the reason the position is vacant. I'm just going to say position is still vacant. I'm going to say this record has been updated. And notice how it clears out salary, years of experience, and the assignment records. In theory, that would then create a vacancy. Well, I guess it did. But this is not, this hasn't been tested yet. So I would still just leave this alone until we have sent you information on how to enter this. So the number of positions which were required to be filled between school year 23-24 and 24-25 were populated based on these employees you gave no longer employed codes. This submission will be used to provide accurate information to the legislators, to the Teacher Compensation Board, and we're getting close to being accurate, but I'd skip over this for now. Okay, last step is your assurance statement. The assurance statement is the final component. You can run it mid-course and, see if you're creating any errors that need to be fixed. And there's a data validation check is the top half. And you have to mark the bottom half to show you're in compliance. So public school districts are required to complete this one plus a second one on the June sign off. The validation checks and certification statements will vary depending on the type of district you operate. For example, those districts that aren't public or co-op won't see any of the salary errors. So the top section is a series of validation checks that are bundled into some business rules and procedures. They are run against each reported district data set to identify data quality issues prior to submitting your data. These checks can be implemented at any time during the collection window and will ensure that you have completed all areas of the PRF, so no errors are detected. Each data validation check is developed to provide the district with these 3 pieces of information. Does a failed check require resolution? It's going to tell you here, which ones of these require resolution, which checks failed. All of these checks failed. And then, it's going to tell you kind of how this is corrected. You can modify the filter list and display the validation checks based on the toggle selection up here. You can see, some of the errors that passed, but the ones of concern are the ones that, didn't pass. So when you click on that running assurance statement, you can go to those that require resolution. This says all contracted personnel data has been reported. And if we go to that error, this one I intentionally set to no. And we need to set that to yes because we had a record. If I go back to this assurance statement and I rerun it, that error goes away. Another one that requires resolution is that assignment record. You must select a quarter or trimester. If we review that, it lists everyone, and you have to remember each time to narrow it down by refreshing the screen. Once you refresh that screen, you can come in and it identifies just this one record that you need to correct. And I forgot to put the quarters in here. Again, you go back to your assurance statement, rerun it. I've got a plan of intent that requires resolution. Again, I have to refresh my screen. So it narrows it down. Oh boy. The bottom section of that assurance statement can be done at any time when you have time available. You just have to be sure that once you say you're in compliance with each of those checks, that you click that save button as you exit the assurance statement. Once you have completed the top half of that assurance statement and the bottom half of that assurance statement, you should be finished with the PRF collection. If you were to sign off before the deadline, which is October 15th, and you remember, oh, I forgot to add one of my employees, you can revoke that sign off. I will show you that. And then you just have to remember to resubmit your assurance statement. But after October 15th, you're going to be locked out of the database. You can still access it to run reports and such. But you can't make corrections after that October 15th. I'm gonna try this one more time. There we go. I forgot to put in a plan of intent for Donald Duck. So I am just going to quickly say that he is pursuing certification and should have it in place by that date. I'm going to save and submit. Okay, if we go back to that assurance statement. Again, you know, these errors don't require resolution. And you should look into them for reasonableness. We're going over on this. The bottom half, I talked to you about. You can mark these at any time as being in compliance with these and save and have it ready for when you submit. And then once you have check marks in each and every one of the boxes, you need to click on the sign off button. Now, because it is before October 15th, if I remember, oops, I forgot to add so-and-so to the educator section, I would just need to revoke my sign off. And then it's going to switch these records from read-only back to where I can modify things.
And Tina, one of the questions that popped up last year is what are the text field entry boxes for below the certification statements? So as an example, it is possibly the case where you do not have 100% birth certificate groupings for your kids, right? You've tried, you've given emails, you've reached out. So this is your place to provide justification. So you're saying I have birth certificate information for all students. However, so-and-so has not replied or not given us. We've reached out twice. It's your place to provide some justification for why there is a chance that when accreditation comes in and they randomly pull that one kid's birth certificate that you haven't been able to get, just that you've been able to properly identify that in your justification. So just a note there to indicate the reason why that would be the case. And I believe for you non-public school districts, I believe we've done some work to try to make sure you only see the certification statements that are relevant to you. If not, you can always in the text field say not a public school, not relevant to us.
Yes. But we did, there were those 4 public school assurance statements that we removed from them. So as far as timelines, October 15th is the deadline to submit data. We try to open it back up the first part of January so that you can close out your 24-25 school year. We're a little slower at getting things opened back up with this new system as we continually try and improve it. And then June 13th is the deadline to make corrections for the 24-25 submission. Remember that, you know, you guys by that time have your 25-26 negotiated agreements written, but we do not want you to enter that information until October of the next year. So, you're just closing out this submission. And should we stop the recording and answer any questions?
At this point, we will stop the recording for this year. We do appreciate everyone's ongoing patience and questions and work with us on the new platform. We do believe we're making a lot of progress, and we hope the platform is becoming more usable to you in the field to enter and make sure your data is accurate. We know the assurance statement checks here are kind of complicated. However, it's an important piece to make sure that all your data is accurately uploaded. So at this point, we will stop the recording and open up the field for questions if there are none, or if there are any left remaining.